Welcome to this episode of Beat Teacher Burnout. Have you tried journaling? Do you know the impact of journaling, of journaling to discover purpose and planning and the effectiveness of your day so that you can thrive, so that your well-being improves? Well, I've discovered Nathan Marr, who has the same passion for journaling as I do, but he's taken it to another level, I would say, with his business partner, because he wants teachers to unlock their full potential, as I do. So I'm really excited to see where this week's podcast goes. So welcome, Nathan. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and how you ended up being a coach and co-founder of the Semester Student Planner?
Yeah, and for sure, as you suggested there, me and my co-founder, we do have a passion for journaling, more my co-founder, and planning, and we've combined that with Semester Student Planner. So going right back to the start, it all started from our own personal frustrations as students. We don't particularly have that experience of being teachers. It's on the other side of the fence where this all started. For myself personally, it was managing the overwhelm of university after completely underestimating the workload, the stress, the burnout that would come from not being equipped with the right tools and strategies. That led me to go through a process of start using planners that were out there on the market. There's many of them, but having that structure and being intentional with my time, going from the first couple of years at university of barely scraping through and nearly dropping out, using planning helped me to completely turn that on its head. And I left with a first in mechanical engineering. That was kind of step one of how semester started. It was years after that we actually had the idea for the business, but Joe at the same time was going through a different but similar journey where he was fine at university, but it came to the end, he graduated, and much like many degrees in education, there was just no after sales, let's call it. It was what now? What's my purpose? And he sank into anxiety and depression, and he managed to pull himself up and out of that through journaling, which led him ultimately to publish his own book called The Book That Became a Counsellor. And it was all the personal growth strategies, emotional well-being strategies that he used to kind of rise above that. Following on from that, from my journey, I then went into the typical corporate world. I did my time as an engineer for a couple of years. I then moved into a commercial role and sales, which then led me down the route of learning more about sales, which at the foundation of it, most of it is around communication and personal growth. And it was at that point that I fell in love with the personal growth side of things, because I saw the learning of that had a direct output on success, well-being, personal development. And that's when I finally had the light bulb moment, seeing what Joe had done with publishing his book, the experience I'd had with planning, and the effect that personal growth can have on people, myself in this case, put them all together in a planner and then offer that to students. So essentially a planner would become a space where they can become intentional with their time first and foremost, but then there's coaching techniques dropped throughout to basically use the planner as a Trojan horse for personal growth for people at that stage of their life that realistically, whether it's school, college or university, there's not a huge focus on those soft skills, which realistically make a huge difference in later life. So that's where Semester Student Planner was born. We opened the business, we created a sample. We're both from Teesside, so we went into Teesside University, started pitching this to lecturers and deans of schools. They loved the idea of students, but when they actually had the planner in their hands, they loved the idea more for themselves. And it was when probably 3 or 4 teachers, all of them said the same thing. I love this. I need this. My staff need this. That the light bulb went out over our head where we were like, it's not just students that need this. We had our own personal experience, but the teachers and the lecturers are feeling the stress just as much, if not more, realistically. So that's, in a nutshell, the journey that we had, going from focusing on students first, which we still do, but more being an element around coaching teachers now as well, and providing them with products where they can manage their emotions better, where they can manage the time better in a system that is really onerous on people's times and energy.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. And I love how you got into it through the experience that you both had yourselves, and then you put that into a product and into inputting really staff, leaders, teachers, students, the whole lot of us really. So what would you say, Nathan, are some key things that you have found that have helped? I mean, most of the people listening today are leaders and teachers. There are some parents listening as well that help when people are really overwhelmed. What are some keys that you would say to
I
try?
think, yeah, I think there's two elements to it. There's the structural element where it's about the whole. So a school itself, college itself, and everyone that's in that machine. I think the key we found there when we do workshops and consult around that sort of level, organisational, is creating a shared sense of purpose. I think it's very easy, and I've heard on some of your other podcasts where leaders felt isolated in realistically what should be frequent social interactions, whether it's with students or teachers. They were intentionally isolating themselves. And again, that's a recipe for disaster because you become very narrow in your view, you're focusing only on your own work and your own KPIs that you have to work for. So creating that shared sense of purpose. Many businesses have their mission, vision, values. Some schools have that as well, but it's actually creating that collectively and then working together on it actively rather than just having them written on a wall. So a shared sense of purpose at the organisational level, at the individual level, or somewhere in between, having a structure where coaching and mentorship is at the heart of it, but then the mentors or coaches are highly aware of what the shared sense of purpose is, so that then the individual purpose can be aligned. Because whether it's in school or business, there's nothing worse than when your purpose doesn't align with the company's purpose or the school's purpose, and that misalignment creates dissonance. And again, that is a recipe for burnout, mental health issues, disengagement. So you're going from the organizational, somewhere in the middle, the individual level. I believe that there should be more of a focus on well-being, emotional management, resilience, which is a bit of a buzzword at the moment. There's a great book for anyone to read called Fortitude, which it sits in between the organizational and the individual on resilience. A lot of people just see resilience as a skill the individual needs to cultivate for themselves, get stronger, be more emotionally resilient. But that book actually describes how resilience is more at the team level and collective level. So if you can build that into any coaching, workshop, CPD, I think that's one of the keys to actually getting everyone, again, pulling in the same direction and more engaged. And then at the individual level, I think CPD, to some extent, there should be a shift from just teaching skills and allowing a bit more space for genuine learning and creativity. And I think, again, that's where coaching's perfect, because coaching at the core of it's non-directive. So implementing something that's non-directive and allowing teachers to discover what creatively sparks them, what they prefer doing, and how they can actually teach in the way that they always wanted to teach to inspire students.
Yeah, yeah. I think a story I tell often is about a teacher who'd been teaching about 5 years, and they said to me that because the lessons were so prescriptive and there was so much bureaucracy, the whole creative element of what they loved about teaching had been taken away.
Yeah.
And so they were literally almost dying inside. And so we discussed a way of having one lesson a day where they could be completely creative. But actually, as you say, if we can look at this as a whole school level, and with your team together, there are lots of ways that we can find our creativity. And the research shows that if we're not thriving in our role, our creativity just doesn't appear anyway, because we're so burnt out. I've got a question for you, which is, you talked about emotional management.
Yeah.
What is that?
It is, I guess emotional management is, there's so many different elements to it, but it's actually the inputs we receive in most cases outside of our control. So it's actually having the skills and techniques and tools that I mentioned earlier to not just react to them, to actually be ready for what's going to come into our stress bucket and what techniques we can use to either alleviate that stress. For me, especially, that is getting outside and being active, or in the moment, how to create some space between the reaction and the actual output. And again, that's on a collective level in teams and on an individual level. But at the core of it, yeah, emotional management is, it's not what happens to us, but it's actually how we react to it that matters. And creating that disconnect between your thoughts actually being a part of you many times, you can actually create that space and disagree with a thought, and having that coaching around being able to do that and creating that space, that's when emotional management turns into emotional intelligence, and it just becomes a natural habit.
Yeah. Well, I love that, because one of the things I put in my first book is the research done looking at self-awareness, and that, I think it's over 85% of us think we are self-aware, but
Yeah,
in fact it's about 15% in reality. And one of the keys to that is when we're in a situation that is, challenging or difficult in some way, we react with either, why did that happen? Oh my goodness, that's so awful. Or, what could I have done to change that? What can I do tomorrow to make that lesson better? What
yeah,
can I say to that parent to engage them? So it's about the why or the what, which is very similar to what you're saying.
yeah. And this is one of the reasons I think I don't particularly journal that much, but I do believe journaling is so important for this level. There's some key elements in our planners that we always have, and at the end of the day, one of them is, what did I learn today? And it's just a simple task. It could be one thing, it could be three things, but it's taking away that kind of doom mentality of what went wrong today, and actually flipping that on its head and just being, what did I actually learn today? What was good? What was challenging? And that's, for me, where journaling is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think certainly for me, in my journal, I talk at the start and the end of many days in it, although every day is a little bit different. But what am I grateful for, or what has gone well, even if it's a tiny little thing,
Yeah,
an adult smiled at me and bought me a cup of coffee, can be a massive win in your day, or something you're grateful for. So as you say, it's then overriding that doom thinking with things that have
yeah,
worked or something you've learned, because we're all always learning, aren't we, at the end of the day?
100%. And I do think gratitude is the number one step anyone should take to build resilience. And you can do it in so many ways. Like you say, gratitude can be what went well today, or it can be as simple as one thing I'm grateful for today. Some people use the hand and do 5 things they're grateful for every morning. There's so many different techniques and ways to do it out there now. But ultimately, once you ingrain that habit, for me especially, I've experienced this, once that gratitude habit's there, you don't even need to particularly keep writing it down. It just becomes wired in your brain, and you just see, as you say, even in the smallest things, someone brings you a coffee or someone smiles at you in the street, and you click onto it every time rather than just being blinkered and not actually seeing it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Now, Nathan, before we started recording, you were talking about some Deloitte statistics about the impact on training in well-being. Can you share that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate to use the term no brainer, but this when you look at the statistics of some of the things around education and well-being, both student and staff, some things do just come across as a no-brainer. And Deloitte have done many studies like this, and other people have done studies. Deloitte specifically was, for every £1 spent on mental health interventions and well-being, you generally get £5 out in productivity. And the productivity comes from less staff attrition, less absenteeism, sickness, presenteeism, which I imagine everyone's experienced both in schools and business. Because ultimately the cost of losing teachers, which is significant at the moment, it's getting towards 10% each year, teachers leaving the profession. It's around 50% to 200% of someone's salary to just replace them, just in lost experience, productivity, using recruiters, all of that sort of stuff. So for every £1 put into the system, there's so many studies now that say you're going to get at least £3 to £5 out. So again, no brainer in that respect. There's other studies that link into that. So emotional intelligence is thankfully coming to the forefront now, and it's been shown how, yes, cognitive intelligence and getting a degree gets you in the door for the profession you're doing. You need to learn the skills and tools, but it's actually emotional intelligence that long term makes a difference. So on that front, something we're teaching specifically. There was a study done where they found that teachers with a higher level of emotional intelligence were more engaged in the work. And then because they were more engaged in the work, that had a direct impact on student success. And this is why it's good to have the student and staff element both working hand in hand. So for me, the stats are clear there that schools, colleges and universities, when they're looking at CPD, they should focus a little bit less on enhancing teaching skills, so to speak, and a little bit more on emotional intelligence, emotional management, and the actual skills to enhance that with teachers, because I think teachers will appreciate that more as well, because they can use it in school and outside of school. It's not just they're constantly getting told how to teach, when we discussed this before as well, didn't we, where it was actually the lack of creative spark that they can bring to the lessons is actually reducing the kind of interest and excitement of teaching, unfortunately.
Yeah. Wow. I think it's fascinating, isn't it? Because you can see the benefit of the journaling and the focus on sort of well-being and investing in well-being, and perhaps investing in well-being for students and for staff, for leaders, well, for all of us actually. It's, as you say, it's a no-brainer. And you and I, we both train in schools and coach, but I guess the journals is key because it's a daily reminder, isn't it, for people? And they say that you have to embed your habits, little habits, regularly. And I think it's after 30 repeats it becomes embedded.
Yeah.
So before we finish, Nathan, would you give one more top tip for people listening if they're feeling really burnt out today? What would
Yeah,
you say to
absolutely.
them?
There's many tips, but I think gratitude would be the key one. Create some form of gratitude practice and habit. Just quickly on habits as well, especially with the time of year it is in January. One tip I would definitely give is don't try and do more than 2 habits at once or introduce them. There's something called the resilience rule of 2. As human beings, we can't actually change more than 2 habits at a time and make them stick. And as you said, it's anywhere between, some people say 21 days, some people say 30, some people say 90 days to make a habit stick. So there's things like 75 hard, which people do, which is about 7 to 8 different habits all at once, which doesn't really work for most people because it is so prescriptive and it is really hard to fit in. So I'd say, look, it sounds strange coming from a coach, but lower your expectations and don't put too much stress on yourself when you're already stressed. So you've got gratitude, not too many habits all at once. A technique that I haven't really heard anywhere else. I've only heard it once and not many people talk about it, especially for teachers. I think would be great is we've all heard about the 80-20 rule, but attaching a task called love it, loathe it onto that. So whether it's over a week or a month, have a notebook, draw a line down the middle, have love it on one side, loathe it on the other. Keep that with you at all times. And throughout the week or month, identify what in your work you love, what in your work you loathe. Then at the end of that assessment, so we're going back to self-awareness here, at the end of that assessment, highlight the tasks that, given the structure and the job that you have to do, will still create great outputs. Then focus 80% of your time on those tasks. And it's just a way of filtering out the kind of monotonous tasks that they get called the trivial many sometimes, that you don't really need to do, or you don't really need to do to a high level. So again, I'm telling people to lower their expectations here to some extent, but it's on the trivial tasks rather than the important ones. And then I guess the final point I would say, in our coaching, one of the things we always focus on is it's not just about mental fitness, it's also about physical fitness as well. And realistically, mental health does need physical support. A lot of the time people forget about the physical and health side of things because they're working 50 to 60 hour weeks. And that's the challenge. But mental health and physical health go hand in hand. And as I said, the mental health needs that physical support. It's another trick for resilience, really. Gratitude and physical health, you do them too. It's life-changing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Those are fantastic. It just reminds me of the time that one of my kids came back to stay at home for a while they worked in London, and he said to me one day, it was about, I don't know, I just dragged myself in the door after a very long day. It was 7 or 7:30 or something. He said, "Mum, you look so exhausted. You need to go to the gym."
Yeah.
I said, "I don't think I can possibly get back in the car and go anywhere." He said, "Trust me, just go try it." So he bugged me about it enough that I did go. Oh my goodness, I felt fantastic afterwards. It's not that I even worked that hard, but I did do some exercise and it really did change my outlook. So you're absolutely right. Thank you for that reminder. Nathan, you've shared so much today. If people want to find out more about you, where would they go?
Yeah, I'd say the one platform that is easiest to find me is LinkedIn. So Nathan Marr on LinkedIn. Other than that, for the Semester Student Planner, it's just semesterstudentplanner.com, but we're also on LinkedIn there as well.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, I really thank you for sharing your story, and say thank you to your business partner for allowing us to share his story as well. And thank you everyone for listening.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com, or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.